Alternative revenue generation is a global phenomenon that is considered a viable solution by government to advance the welfare of its citizens, promote economic growth and development through the provision of infrastructural amenities. Now, with the devastating impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the economy and the fall in crude oil price in the international market, the need to diversify the economy at this crucial point cannot be overemphasized. Hence, the need for government to pay more attention in the investment of the commodities market. Commodities are basically raw materials, which includes fuels, agricultural products, mineral ores, and metals, which are traded on the commodities market. More than 2/3 of Africa's country are over 80% reliant on commodities exports when compared to their total export value, while manufactured goods and services accounts for the remaining exports. The vast agricultural potentials of Nigeria has necessitated innovations to enhance growth. One of the key developments in the agri sector is the emergence of a commodities market where farm produce are priced for industrial inputs, domestic consumptions, and exports. Today, we focus on commodities markets, its role in wealth creation. My guest is Mr. Ayodeji Balogun. He's the Chief Executive Officer, Commodities Exchange Limited. He joins us live from our Abuja studios. Thank you very much for your time. All right, if you can hear me, Mr. Balogun, are you there? CEO, AFX Commodities Exchange Limited. Is joining us from Abuja.
Yes, Ayodeji Balogun, CEO, AFX Commodities.
Thank you very much, sir. Now let's go on. Briefly make us to understand what a commodities exchange is and how it operates. Who are the people affected by its works?
So if you look at a commodities exchange, fundamentally it seeks to solve three problems. So first is, how do you ensure that products get moved from the producer to the processor efficiently and seamlessly with all the quality parameters needed kept. The second part of what the commodities exchange does is to ensure that both the producer and the processor have the right financing structures. They can access funds to produce and then buy the commodities that they are working on. The third part of this is storage, using the warehouse receipt system to ensure that you can store the grains and then the grains and their integrity are kept through the entire life of trade. So these are the problems what the commodities exchange does.
Now, indeed, now with COVID-19, climate change, floods, people nurse fears about food shortage. But we have seen the government and the CBN rolling out support programs for farmers. Where does your commodities exchange fit into in all of this?
We're a very strong part of the food security strategy of the country. We do collaborate very strongly with the Central Bank of Nigeria in its agenda to ensure that food is connected between, produced at the right quantity, at the right quality, and then they get delivered to the final buyers. So, typically the food processing companies, but also the animal feed, fishery, poultry sectors. As we know, what you need to ensure that you have an effective food system and that the country has enough food to cover its needs for the entire year. You need to be able to manage the supply side, which is the producer, ensure that farmers produce optimally, they produce the right quality that the industry needs, and that the quantity is actually sufficient. On the other side, when you look at the demand side, you need to work at the food processors, the feed processing companies, the domestic demand, and as well as the export market, and ensure that you balance both demand and supply effectively. As a commodities exchange, we stand right at the middle of this supply and demand, and then ensure that there's a seamless balance within two. Buyers can get the right funding to buy these commodities, they can store it, and then as they need to use it over the year, they can have access to draw down on the inventory that they've purchased. On the other side, farmers, we work with over 110,000 farmers. They do get financing, and this financing comes in with the training, the education. They also comes in with the right input that they need to produce these grains. So when they get these products, we do aggregate, store it, and then we create the market access. We have a technology digital platform that connects buyers and sellers and then allows them to sell those commodities and ensure that they get the best prices possible.
Sounds very interesting. But in developed economies, agriculture is big business, feeding nations, employing people, and of course, earning foreign exchange. Now, what level of investments and financing do we need to turn up this sector in Africa's most populous nation?
So for Nigeria currently, the size of credit that goes to agriculture from commercial banks stands at about 5 trillion. Now, in our estimate, that is barely 5%, I think 4.6% of the total credit allocation by commercial banks to the private sector. In our estimation, for us to really have a meaningful, sustainable food system for the country, we need about 2.5 trillion. So part of our mandate over the next 5 years at Apex Commodities Exchange is to ensure that we're able to create new innovative instruments that would attract about 2 trillion in credits to the entire sector. So we're working with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the central bank, and other exchanges focused on the money markets to ensure that we can actually create new instruments that will be investable both to asset managers, fund managers, and can start to attract the pension funds, which is a large pool of capital that today doesn't finance the real sector of the economy.
Let's now talk about this renewed interest in cocoa production and its value chain. Take us through what is playing out and the figures we're seeing.
So cocoa, we all know the contribution of cocoa as a crop to Nigeria's history. All the universities built in the 70s and the 80s, the hospitals, were all financed through proceeds of cocoa, particularly in the southern country. The federal government even had, history tells us that the federal government even got loans from the southern region from the wealth that they were able to build from cocoa as a commodity. And Nigeria's relevance in international trade is primarily built on the back of our role as historically the largest supplier of cocoa from the region. Today we are number 5, far behind countries like Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana that are also big today, that are the biggest producers of cocoa. If you look at what has driven this decline in volume, so primarily it's about the structure. How do you share incentives? The incentive structure of the cocoa sector today is one that does not support the smallholder farmer. So there is no incentive for the farmer to nurture the tree because the yields are, the returns on his investments are just extremely low. So what you've found is that you have a cocoa sector with very aging trees, and then as the ages of a cocoa tree goes above 25 to 30 years, the yields decline, the quality of the beans decline. There are new seeds and new varieties, new technology that comes in today that can get a lot better pods and a lot better cocoa beans. We've not, as a country, focused on the cocoa sector enough in the last decade to ensure that we can sustain the quality and the quantity of our cocoa production. So if you look at the volume we did, in 1960 we did over 450,000 metric tons. Today we struggle to reach 200,000 metric tons of cocoa being exported from Nigeria. And the year-on-year is that we lose about 7% of our total volume produced. Except we really look at this and have a very strong national strategy to ensure that we have an aggressive plan to first nurture and sustain existing plantations. Second, to start to grow in new fields aggressively so that we have new plantations that will start ripening in the next 3 to 4 years. And third, we create a structure that ensures that the value from the bean is equitably shared across all the players in the sector. We will, in 10 years, be saying it as history that Nigeria traded cocoa with the rest of the world. So this is, in our opinion, at FX Commodities Exchange, a matter of emergency. And we are standing at the forefront to rally private interests, public sector players, regional government to ensure that we bring cocoa back to the center stage of policy and ensure that we have the right programs that will ensure that we remain a powerhouse for cocoa.
Let's round up on this note. Let's look into the technical work that you do at FX Commodities Exchange. How do you reach farmers or collect farm produce? Just take us through that as we round up this discussion.
Yeah, it is, it is in our DNA to ensure that whatever we do actually starts from the farmer. The story of agriculture is never complete without putting the farmer at the center stage. So first is we ensure that we have the empathy to understand who they are, what the challenges are. We ensure that they are able to then explain what the challenges they face, and then we look at it from a design principle standpoint to say, how can we provide solutions that are scalable but commercially viable? So we have field officers that manage them in cooperatives. We rely very heavily on the strength of cooperatives and the local ties they have within their communities. And then we make this connection happen through technology. So every farmer that we have today has a unique ID that ensures that it's part of the financial ecosystem, ensures that it can transact and sell to a final buyer regardless of the size, the volume of the commodity it sells. Technology allows us to be able to aggregate massive volumes across multiple locations, and the challenges that the farmer has because he has just 5 bags or 10 bags to sell are then eliminated. He then gets a fair price. So on the platform today, you would have a sorghum farmer selling his sorghum, and it's being bought by a final end user that is milling that product. So that's the power that we use. We rely very heavily on the social norms in the community. We rely very strongly on innovation and technology. Then also being able to be creative with financial instruments that can unlock funding for the producer, for the processor, and every other person in the value chain.
I must thank you very much for your time. Mr. Ayodeji Balogun is the Chief Executive Officer, FX Commodities Exchange Limited, joined us live from our Abuja studios.